Now, we're going to keep this show rolling. Everybody feeling good? We're excited. We're over here talking science. This is amazing. I love it. All right, we're going to get really quiet right now because this next presenter is absolutely special. You guys are in for a treat. I get the chance to introduce two friends of mine. I had Inspector Planet, Dr. Tracy Venera. Now I get to introduce another friend of mine, a fellow science communicator. From launching rockets in her backyard to dissecting pig brains in her top secret laboratory at home as a child, she always knew she was destined for a STEM career. But Kelly had no idea that one day she would use her love for science to help solve crimes. Kelly is a forensic scientist and a professor with George Mason University Forensic Science Program. She has a passion for STEM outreach. She mentors undergraduate students and has implemented hundreds of activities and events for K through 12 students. And if that wasn't enough, Kelly is currently pursuing her PhD in science education research. And if y'all thought that my social content was hilarious, you have no idea because she is absolutely amazing. Superwoman, super mom, super forensic scientist, the one and only Professor Kelly Knight.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. How y'all doing? Nah. I don't roll like that. I need some concert level energy. How y'all doing? That's what I'm talking about. I gotta follow up the guy that blew up the asteroid. What? I need some energy in here. Okay, so even though I have to follow up the asteroid guy, I'm here to talk about the real CSI, and hopefully it will be just as exciting. All right, so let me see a show of hands if you've seen or heard of any of these shows. I have to ask this because whenever I talk to students, they always say they want to be a criminal profiler. How many of you are interested in criminal profiling? Nobody knows what criminal profiling is? A couple in the back? Okay, good. So you won't be disappointed when I tell you I'm not a criminal profiler. That's good news. Okay, good. All right, well, hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm a real forensic scientist, not like on TV, a little bit, I guess you could say, but I'm a real one. So what is forensic science, and how did I even get here? So the best definition of forensic science is science as applied to the law. So forensic scientists are scientists at their core, biologists, chemists, and we use our science in order to solve things that are of a legal matter. So a lot of people know about crime scene investigation and things like that, but they don't always know about some of these other areas, like digital forensics and anthropology and question documents and entomology. So forensic science is really just an umbrella term, right? So forensic science generally is using science to solve things of a legal matter, but there's so many other disciplines that fall underneath it. And I am a forensic biologist. So my specialty is within biology and DNA. Now, usually when people go into forensic science, there's one of two paths that they follow. Either they go into the lab or they do field work. So if you go into the field, you may be doing things like forensic anthropology, which is going to a scene and trying to search for and identify human remains. Another area of forensic science where you do a lot of field work is wildlife forensics. How many of you have heard of poaching or the illegal trafficking of animals? So did you know there are forensic scientists who actually help solve those types of crimes? Those are called wildlife forensic scientists. And then, of course, the field that most people know in terms of forensic scientists who work outside of the lab, and that's crime scene investigators. And those are the folks who actually go to crime scenes, search for, collect, and package evidence. Now, if you're working in a lab, there's a lot of different things you could do in a lab. There are people who do digital forensics. So how many of you have a cell phone? How many of you know that there is GPS in your cell phone that's tracking your every move? It is, it's kind of creepy. How many of you know that if a crime were to occur, they could gather that cell phone and pull all the data out of that and figure out every single place that you've been? Yeah? So there are people who do that in forensics. They're called digital forensic scientists. If you look at your finger, you have something called a fingerprint. There are people who just look at fingerprints, fingerprint examiners. Do we have any identical twins in the room? Any identical twins? Well, like I mentioned, I'm a DNA analyst, and identical twins share the same DNA profile. However, their fingerprints are different. And so that is a really unique feature that fingerprint analysts are going to look for. And then, of course, you could do your more traditional lab things like being biologists, chemists, things of that nature. So where do they work? Here's the most beautiful thing about forensic scientists. Anyone who majors in STEM could be a forensic scientist. Any type of science you study, technology, engineering, math, that could be applied to forensics, which means you have a ton of job options. How many of you want a job one day? Yeah? Jobs are good. You can make money. So you have so many options as a forensic scientist. You can work for law enforcement. You can work for the government. You can work private industry, or you could work for a university. I've worked for the state government because I work for the state police. I've also worked for several universities, and I've also worked in the private lab, and they all have their pros and cons. There's even forensic scientists who work in museums. I'm gonna say a big word. Everybody say with me, forensic ornithology. Yes, okay. A forensic ornithologist is someone who actually studies crimes and matters that have occurred with birds. Birds. So if there is an airstrike by birds, meaning the birds try to take your plane down, there is someone who can actually look at the feathers and determine exactly what species of bird tried to take you out. Isn't that cool? I love that. So again, where did I work and what did I do? So I mentioned I worked in a private lab when I was in college. I've worked in a university research lab, and I also worked for the state crime lab as a DNA analyst. And essentially what I did was I used my knowledge of biology in order to help solve crimes. Another part that I wasn't as prepared for was expert testimony. How many of you love public speaking? Anyone really, really afraid to speak in public? Guess what? I got a secret to tell you. I'm afraid to. Even though I'm speaking to all of y'all, I'm afraid to speak in public as well. I know, it doesn't make sense. I'm speaking to all of you, and I'm actually afraid on the inside. That's why I didn't have any coffee this morning. No coffee for me on public speaking days. But part of my job was having to go to court and tell all of the people exactly what I did and how I did it. And the scary part is when the opposing counsel gets to attack you. I hate to say attack because they're really doing their job, but at the moment it feels like an attack. But that is part of our job because we have to uphold the justice system, right? Everybody deserves to be questioned if they're going to be doing things that impact the justice system. So if I'm testing evidence related to crimes, I have to go to court and tell them exactly what I did, how I did it, and what my results were. So in a nutshell, this is what I do. So we have the crime scene investigators who go to the crime and they search for and collect the evidence, right? They package it and then they bring it to my lab. And my job is to figure out, are there any biological fluids in it, because there's DNA in biological fluids, or are we just working with skin cells, because there's also DNA in our skin cells. Once I do that, I go through a whole list of procedures in order to finally get to a DNA profile. And so ultimately what I'm trying to do is look at the evidence profile from the crime scene and compare that to reference profiles from either suspects or victims or people who have maybe rightfully been at the crime scene, and determine if there's any matches there. So where did this all begin, and how did I even get here? Well, I am admittedly a STEM nerd. Any other STEM nerds in the house? STEM nerds rule the world. I love it. I've always loved STEM, and my dad is a retired air traffic controller. My mom is a retired teacher. And so what that meant is I spent a lot of time learning about STEM in my house. So my dad loved all things air and space, and I think he lived vicariously through me a lot. So we built a lot of rockets. He took me to the Air and Space Museum. He would buy me pig brains from the grocery store and let me dissect them in my pink tutu, which was totally normal. But there were some things about me that I now notice were really helpful for me in terms of becoming a forensic scientist. So I was always very detail-oriented and organized. I was also very curious. The not-so-nice word that people used to say was nosy. I take offense to that, okay? Nosy people, anybody who's nosy or have been called nosy? Yeah, it's kind of rude. Turn that deficit into an asset, okay? If people call you nosy, you say, no, I'm just curious. I have scientific curiosity, okay? Always love to solve problems, do puzzles, always had lots of questions, liked to help people, and was creative. So that's one side of STEM that people don't think about. People in STEM are really creative. You know, I loved art and dance and all of those things, and I think that really helped me become a scientist. Now, when I was in high school, this stereotype is thankfully starting to change. But when I was in high school, I did a lot of things that weren't considered traditionally smart, what smart people did. I was a cheerleader. I was captain of the cheerleading team. And people always said cheerleaders had this dumb stereotype. I played volleyball, I danced, I played tennis. I was even on the homecoming court and won homecoming queen. But even despite all of that, I was still valedictorian. And so it was hard for people to kind of understand that you could be all the things, right? You can have this one set of skills, and you can still be highly intelligent. Yeah, shout it out for that. And then I took anatomy and physiology. Anybody taking that class in high school, anatomy and physiology? And we did a blood typing lab. And basically what the teacher had us do is she had us take a murder scene, and she said, you know, here's the blood types from the crime scene, here's the blood type from the suspects and the victim, and you have to do the comparison and see who did it. And that was the first time out of all the time I had spent studying science in middle school and high school, that was the first time someone had answered the question, why do I care? Why do I care about science? I had spent so much time memorizing equations. My chemistry teacher made me memorize the periodic table, but nobody told me why. Why am I doing this? And when I was introduced to forensic science, I was blown away. I said, oh my gosh, look at all of these different ways science is being used to contribute to the greater good. But then I went to college, and I started out as high school valedictorian. That was amazing. But then I got to my first biology freshman lecture. I was one of 300 students. I didn't see anybody who looked like me, because y'all know I came to freshman class dressed to the nines, okay? I was like, I'm here. Everybody else was in pajamas, and I was like lipstick down. I was like, where's the teacher? And I struggled. I got a C in that first biology class, and I panicked, and I ran for the hills. I said, that's it. STEM isn't for me. I ended up majoring in chemistry because I did well that first year in chemistry, but I continued to struggle. I no longer identified with that brilliant STEM person I felt like when I was growing up. My parents always made me feel like I was the most brilliant scientist. I went to high school, I was valedictorian, so I felt brilliant. And then I went to college, and it was like, womp, womp, womp. And that was really hard, and I struggled. But then I found forensic science again my senior year, and I ended up working in a DNA lab, and I fell in love all over again. And I had the choice to either stay in school longer to get the classes I needed to be in forensic science, or I could go to grad school. I decided to go to grad school. I applied to one school because my GPA was trash, y'all. I'm not gonna lie. My GPA was trash. Who thinks I got into that grad school? Come on. Yes and no. I was waitlisted. But then I had the opportunity to talk to them, and I convinced them. I said, if you let me in, I promise you I will show you that I deserve a spot in your program. I went in, and I turned it all around. I got a mentor right there, Dr. Tracy Dawson-Cruz. She changed my life. I had the opportunity to do research and publish. And so I went from 0 to hero, y'all. My GPA was not great at undergrad, but I was able to turn it all around. So I say all that to say, you will have bad days and you will fail sometimes, and that's okay. Because that's when I cue Beyonce, You Won't Break My Soul. On the count of 3, let me hear you. So you won't break my soul. 1, 2, 3. You won't break my soul. You won't do it. You won't do it. So remember, success is not a destination, right? We don't reach somewhere and say, yes, I'm at success. You will experience success along the way, time and time again, but you will also continue to experience failure. It's all a part of the journey. Would have never guessed that I would have started in the crime lab and then became a professor and continuing to do things more and more and more. Just last weekend, I had the opportunity to go to LA and film a show about an unsolved case for the History Channel. Would have never guessed that STEM would have taken me to this point. So where will STEM take me next? I don't know. The world is my oyster, right? So a couple of years ago, I was introduced to the worldwide world of STEM content creation, where I met my dear IG friends over there. There's a whole world of STEM folks online that can literally be like your virtual mentors. We post and share about our wins, our losses, our journeys. So definitely check that out at Kelly the Scientist. Let me do a plug. Okay, I'm on IG. Also a PhD student, entrepreneur. So when you become a STEM-minded person, those skills can be monetized. That is unique. Your STEM knowledge is desirable. People want to pay you for those skills. So I'm using that to help do consultations. Also, outreach. I love talking to K through 12 students. I love giving back what was given to me, and then maybe even more TV and media. I don't know. I'm excited. I got the LA bug last week, y'all, so I don't know. I feel like I need to be out there some more. So remember, your path will change, and that's okay. That's all a part of the journey. So just to recap, forensic science, law plus science. You can work in the field, you can work in the lab, you can work all over, right? You all probably have so many of these qualities already that would make you an excellent forensic scientist. And remember that the road may be bumpy and your path may change, but I always say, it wasn't my intelligence that got me where I am. I feel like I'm an average person with average intelligence, but what I am that is different is I will not quit. I will not give up. I put in a lot of hard work, and I'm persistent. So just remember, at the end of the day, don't give up, and you can go from your childhood dream to reality. Thank y'all for listening. I'm Kelly, and I'm a real forensic scientist.
Give it up for Professor Kelly Knight. Yes. She's got the LA bug now, so she will be joining us down in La La Land. We're gonna talk about that. But this is your time right now. The volunteers are here with the mics. I'm sure you have some crazy questions about her work as a forensic scientist. So feel free to get up to the mics and shoot away. First question.
My name's Ishara Laxina.
I'm gonna come down to you. First of all,
I'll do it. I get it.
Can I just say, I love your pink suit, girl? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. My question is, could we use Neandra for DNA that won the Nobel Prize because this person used mitochondrial DNA to discover it? What if we use that kind of method of mitochondrial DNA to figure out crime scenes faster than we do now?
I love your brilliance right now. So she's asking about mitochondrial DNA. So mitochondrial DNA is DNA that is passed down through our maternal lineage. So I have the same mitochondrial DNA as my great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. And what's cool is we do use that for solving crimes because mitochondrial DNA is circular and protected. It is more likely to be still present in ancient samples than traditional DNA. So we do use mitochondrial DNA to solve crimes. Good question.
Does your job anytime gross you out?
Yes. My job grosses me out all the time. I think probably the most disgusting thing I got in the crime lab was a jar of stomach contents. That was pretty bad. So there's this misconception that if you work in the lab, you won't see anything that's nasty. Well, that's not true. So there are definitely things, and the smells, I mean, you just can't recreate it. So yeah, it can be kind of gross.
Hi, my name is Sarai Davis. My question is, what challenges did you have to face?
Yeah, so I faced a lot of challenges. I would say the most difficult thing for me was just getting out of my own head and allowing myself to experience failure, because I grew up a very much type A, high-strung, everything has to be perfect type of child. And that's partially due to my parents. I love them, and they had the best intentions, but they made me feel like I was the center of the STEM universe all the time. And that has pros and cons, right? So the amazing thing was I had the self-confidence I needed to go out there. But that also meant whenever I made a mistake, I was so incredibly hard on myself. And it was hard for me to break out of that. Mistake does not mean that I'm worth any less, right? I'm still a smart person who has worth, and that's all a part of the journey. So that was really hard for me. Still learning that.
Hi, my name is Kira Payne, and I have two questions, actually.
Yeah.
So first, what's the most interesting thing you've ever learned on the job? And what's some advice you have for people going into STEM?
Yeah, so the most dangerous thing I wouldn't say I've learned, but things that I've noticed being in the field that has made me kind of paranoid is sometimes people can't be trusted. So I would be surprised by the number of cases I would work where the perpetrator was someone that was supposed to be a friend or relative or someone that meant something to that person. And that was always probably more heartbreaking for me than someone who didn't know them, because you're like, wow, this person valued you and you harmed them. So that was hard. And for STEM, I would say keep doing what you're doing right now. Continue to immerse yourself in the field. Gain exposure to all different types of things, because there's so many areas of STEM that you could never even imagine that you would not know about unless you continue to do programs like this or go to camps. So, and take lots of science classes when you're in high school. That's always super helpful for college. Good question.
All right, we have time for one last question. Sorry, because we'll have to break for lunch after this. So one last question, but like all the other presenters, Kelly will be here afterwards for y'all to ask any of your remaining questions. So we're gonna take one last question.
My name is Zola, and my question is, do you feel a sense of accomplishment when you start to connect the dots and figure it out?
Yes, that is the best feeling ever. So one of the hardest things about processing a case is you can't look at the known reference standards from the suspects and the victims until you reach the end, right? So you do all of this work on the crime scene evidence, and you're looking at your results, and you can't look at the references because you don't want to be biased, right? So once you do your analysis on the crime scene evidence, that moment where you get to finally compare it to the suspects and the victims, it's like the best feeling. And we don't always get any type of match. Sometimes we get nothing. Sometimes the data is just zero. Sometimes people don't match. But even still, the excitement is just something that I can't explain. It's definitely a moment where I nerd out. Thank you.
Awesome. Please give a big round of applause for Professor Kelly Knight. Woo! Absolutely amazing.